More than a month ago, young people in Bangladesh took to the streets to demand change. Calls for Sheikh Hasina to step down as Prime Minister were answered. What is next for the country? I'm Anelise, Borges, and this is The Stream.
Sheikh Hasina has resigned and fled the country.
The students did it. It was Gen Z that did it.
Although a lot of us have been celebrating all morning, this is still a very crucial and scary time.
In August, we broadcast our first episode on students in Bangladesh risking it all to end 15 years of a government accused of tyranny, corruption and violence. Those protests peaked in the midst of other movements, and you guys have actually made the link on our Instagram page saying 2024 is the year college students show the world that you cannot step on necks without resistance. But standing between Bangladeshi students and the future they want is a significant amount of work that includes much-needed reforms as well as a quest for justice and accountability. To discuss, we're following up with the guests that joined us a month ago. Prapti Taposhi, a student at Jahangarnagar University. She's joining us from the Bangladeshi capital, Dhaka. Tasnima Zaman, a Columbia University graduate, joining us from New York. And the student behind the Bangladeshi Voice on Instagram, whose identity we're still not divulging for his protection. So we're going to call him, once again, John, which is not his real name. John is joining us from the UK. Thank you all so much for being part of the stream once again. Prapti, last time we spoke, protests were at their peak, and you said Dhaka felt like a war zone. We know that there's been quite a lot of chaos and violence following the ousting of the Prime Minister, but what are things like now? Can you describe what does Dhaka feel like today?
Thank you so much for the question. It feels really overwhelming, to be back after a month and in the stream, and we're talking and we're alive. So yes, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. If you ask me about the things, what are like the things in Dhaka, I would say, first of all, that the shops and the hospitals, the universities, the schools and colleges, banks, hotels and restaurants, those are open. Those are open now. But I believe, and we all believe, the people in Bangladesh believe, there are still a lot to done, return to normalcy, because the law and order, particularly, are not yet in order. They're yet to restore. We are hearing news, and we have seen 2 incidents of people that those are being beaten to death by mob justice. So yes, law and order are still not in order. They're yet to restore. And we have also seen different videos and different incidents of shrinks of different peers, fakirs, baus. Those are being destroyed by mob, and the mob is controlling everything in rural areas and urban areas particularly. There are lots of false cases that are being filed with the people who had nothing to do with the with the revolution, with the mass killing as well. And the thing which I am particularly I am very concerned about, that is the top criminals and the top terrorists are being released. So I believe that the capital Dhaka, and I won't only say about the capital, I will say about the whole Bangladesh, the law and order situation, we are not at all happy or at all satisfied about the law and order situation. Things are yet to restore, and the mob justice is still there. And I believe that there is a lot to yet to return to normalcy.
My next question is actually related to that, and I think you partially answered what John may now explain to me, because as we said at the start, John, you're the driving force behind the Bangladeshi Voice, that Instagram account that has served to get the word out, to amplify the voices of those people taking to the streets in Bangladesh. And when we first spoke, you didn't want to show your identity for fears for your safety. You said that the climate in your country was one of persecution, but the government has changed, and today you're still not showing your face. Can you tell us why?
The answer is really quite multifaceted. If you ask me, the reason behind me not wanting to come on is because the Bangladeshi voice has now grown into a community of more than 50 people who are spanning across the globe, working as a volunteer community. The reason I can't show my identity or any of the other members is mainly because we say things, we do things that anger other people who have been beneficiaries of the previous regime, who are corrupt. Now that we serve as a watchdog, we don't pick any sides. We want to highlight what's wrong, what's going wrong in the country, in the political, economical atmosphere. But because of the things we say, I think it's of absolute importance that we keep our identity hidden. And it's not just for myself, it's also for the rest of my team members, because I don't want anyone to be able to connect who's putting out information that can shed light on someone's corruption or someone's illegal activities.
Understood. So you basically want to remain the watchdog here, and that's a tall, complicated mission, I guess. Tasnima, can you explain to us, this has been an enormous change, and this chapter has obviously had implications on the entire country, notably the economy. Can you tell us a little bit about how this change in governance has affected the economy? We've heard about garment workers, for example, shutting down, some 100 factories demanding better wages. What is the situation like now?
In order to answer that question fully, I think we have to understand what the economic situation in the country looked like before and after the collapse of the regime. I think in the past couple of years, we've seen a remarkable economic transformation with surge in garment exports and infrastructural investments, with poverty rates being halved and GDP per capita increasing, but that has also been coupled with rising inequality and unemployment and skyrocketing prices for essential foods. And so this is already setting the stage for an economic crisis of sorts. And although Bangladesh has been on the track for economic development, GDP growth isn't the only determinant of prosperity. There have been existing issues of needing a fair distribution of wealth and income and jobs for young people with fair wages and good working conditions. So now that the regime has collapsed, and in the past couple of years, the economy has been suffering from a combination of from protesting to curfews to communication blackouts, and most notably, as you mentioned, garment factory workers have been protesting for better working conditions and better wages, amongst other things, rightfully so. And this is leading to the projected shutdown of almost 100, as you mentioned, garment factories. And this is a huge problem because the garment industry is a big revenue generator for Bangladesh, and there's already a projected or an expected significant drop in exports just in this year alone. But it's still important to recognize that the former regime is accountable in the current economic situation. Hasina's government had spent an excessive amount on certain infrastructural development projects, and forms of cronyism and nepotism have now left this country in a financially crippled situation where the government had exploited the country's resources. So what is left now is looking ahead. We have to expect years of financial recovery and perhaps, forms of bailout. And as Dr. Yunus had mentioned, there is a need for comprehensive reforms to the economy that invest in human infrastructure at the very minimum. So really it is a lot of work to go ahead.
Dr. Yunus, the interim Prime Minister, who has an enormous amount of work ahead of him. Prapti, I wanted to ask you about the role of students, because a week after the former Prime Minister was ousted, students who had demonstrated against her were seen directing traffic in Dhaka, checking driving licenses, reminding people to wear their seatbelts, their helmets. Are they still that committed in making this new chapter work?
You know that the students who were controlling the traffic, the students who were checking the license of the drivers, we are the students who participated in the famous road safety movement at 2018. So yes, the students are still, they are still protesting against all kinds of injustices and discriminations. Like I've said that about the mob justice, the students are speaking against it. And you know, the new cabinet includes Nahid and Atif, two of our student leaders. So the student leaders are in the interim government now as well. And if you ask me how connected the students are right now, so after we have all seen that students were controlling traffic, they were checking the road lights and everything. And after that, the students also started monitoring the shops and local hotels and restaurants, and they checked if there are any incidents of extortion or anything. They also checked the prices of local necessities, and they checked everything. If there is any kind of situation is happening which should not be done. And one thing I would like to mention very importantly, that is after the resignation of the killer Hasina, we are observing and we are experiencing a lots of discussions and talks that are being organized by students. Discussions and talks like what Bangladesh we need, what kind of universities we need, what kind of educational institutions we want, what are we watching from the lens of the students, from the lens of the development practitioners, from the social social people who were connected in the protest, from the teachers, and people from all classes, all livelihoods of the society. So there are lots of interesting discussions and talks that are being organized at the capital as well as in different schools and colleges and universities. We are also observing this. So the students are also taking charge of the new Bangladesh, and they are also asking different people from all communities, that how the new Bangladesh should be and how we can form the community, how we can restore all the ideas to establish, to live in a new harmony.
That is fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating, that people feel as though they can actually be part of this new Bangladesh. John, I wanted to ask you about the role of social media in all this, because we've obviously seen quite a lot of people mobilizing and organizing these protests through social media. And of course, you created a page that has helped amplify this movement. How important does social media remain for Bangladesh today?
Yeah, I think platforms like my page were absolutely instrumental during the blackout. The movement relied on digital platforms not only to organize the protests, but also in an effort to archive evidence and evidences of government crackdowns and police brutality, ensuring that the narrative of the uprising that remained in public view despite the blackout. So going forward, I think the social media aspect is even more important than ever before, because right now we have new people in charge, new government in charge, and right now we can hone this potential of social media to hold these people accountable, to ensure that there's a certain level of transparency and accountability ensured in our governance system. For example, most recently, we've seen certain situations where the previously opposition parties, BNP and Zaman and other people, certain members of those parties have been involved in extortions, violences, and unfortunate events. And the parties have held them accountable for that. We hope that the government will take a good lesson from what has happened in the past, and the future governance system will reform accordingly, so that we can not only use social media, but our local media, our mainstream media as well, to establish that certain level of transparency and accountability within the government and the people.
And to actually serve the people and not the government, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. We've been talking about this, what feels like a very positive change, right, for Bangladesh. But this was also a very sad and deadly moment for you guys. I mean, over 1,000 people have been killed and some 400 students have lost their eyesight, according to a statement from the interim health ministry. And I would like to take a look now at a clip from the Al Jazeera documentary series Witness that shows the level of violence protesters faced. Tasnima, the former Prime Minister is now facing murder charges in more than 100 cases. But how do you go about seeking justice in a country where the judicial system lost all semblance of independence? Some say it's not even fit for purpose to actually put her and other authorities on trial.
I think it's crucial to have an absolute nuanced understanding of what the past 15 years have been like for the Bangladeshi people. The citizens of Bangladesh have been going through 15 years of economic exploitation, of corruption, of human rights abuses, with enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings and violent suppression. And so what we're seeing right now is a lot of anger, and a lot of that anger is potentially turning violent, which is a reaction of the oppression that the people have been going through. And as we've seen in the news and as we've read, a lot of party members have fled or have tried to flee to other countries like India, the UK, US, Canada, and other places in fear of violent retaliation because they knew the violence they were inflicting. And so what we're needing going forward is an absolute proper prosecution of all criminals of the former regime that were involved in enacting these levels of oppression. And it's important that going forward that the interim government and any future leadership is able to reconcile forms of retributive justice as well as rehabilitation. So we're not recreating Hasina's Bangladesh, we're creating one that is filled with hope, filled with prosperity, filled with justice and accountability. So that is, I think, an all-encompassing vision of what justice should be looking like going forward.
And of course, there are rights groups that are actually warning against this kind of vigilante justice, on the other hand, that may be another excess that could, in fact, actually perpetuate the system that had been in place before. Prapti, I want to ask you about what needs to happen going forward, right? Because we've been talking about students, arguably the driving force in this massive change for Bangladesh. But while they are happy to place their bets in this interim government right now, they may also run out of patience if it takes too long for things to actually happen. In your opinion, what needs to happen in the next 6 months to a year so that this trust, this new trust, is not broken, is not lost?
Thank you so much for addressing that issue. We all were really relieved and we were really hopeful the new interim government. But the way that things are happening now, the things are approaching now, I believe that all of us, the student protesters who are on the street, we are observing things, absolutely. But we know that this is a huge challenge. There is a lot to do. There's a lot of situations to be done. But the new interim government has to understand that the people of Bangladesh has shown their whole trust and hope to them. So yes, they have a lot to do. And first of all, to restore the law and order. Oh my God, there is no absolute any option other than that. The law and order situation in the whole Bangladesh, like I have said previously, after a month, we are having a big festival of the Hindu minorities named Durga Puja. So we are observing that we would be happy to have a proper law and order situation before that Puja. And absolutely, we all become very happy and hopeful when we become mesmerized when we hear a very populist speech, a very famous speech, a speech which will blow your heart. But the people of Bangladesh, the students of Bangladesh, they want action now. They want the speeches, the mesmerizing populist speeches to be converted into action. So absolutely the proper law and order situation and the proper criminals are needed to be persecuted. The criminals who we have lost our brothers and sisters and so many of our friends. They're still in the hospitals. I cannot even imagine. So the criminals are needed to be persecuted and proper accountability to the interim government, to the student leaders, to the people who are in the interim government. They should ensure proper accountability to the people because the people are those who have given them the power, and if they don't do that, like John said, we are acting as watchdogs. We are observing them. The students are observing them. The protesters are observing them. And if we see that anybody, we don't care who that is, anybody who follows the passive structure of murderous Sheikh Hasina, anybody who follows the autocratic system of the murderous legacy of Sheikh Hasina, we won't think a second to, kick them out.
John, reforming institutions and effectively rebuilding a country takes time, though. I mean, and the interim Prime Minister, who is also a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, has asked for patience. Can Bangladesh afford it?
In all fairness, rebuilding a nation after the fall of a long-standing dictator such as Sheikh Hasina understandably requires significant time and effort to address the deeply rooted political, economic, and social challenges. We are all aware that Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, known for his pioneering work, his call for patience as the government tries to stabilize the country. He did emphasize that the administration is working hard to restore order and curb violence following the tumultuous ousting of Hasina. However, speaking on that note, I'd like to add on to something that Prapti has said. The road to restoring law and order is not simply, you cannot approach it in a way of just establishing law and order, but first you need to weed out the problems that existed in the first place. I know we all want to extradite Hasina from India and make sure that she faces trial, but we cannot forget the hundreds of policemen, the leaders, the officers, the people in charge who carried out the orders on behalf of her. I have not so far seen or noticed any considerable action from the government to bring these people under trial as well. As well as while we do focus on Hasina, the government did also come under severe scrutiny for some of its decisions to appoint several controversial figures in the positions of power. Critics did argue that composition of his cabinet and certain of those appointments, like most recently I would mention Ali Imam Mazumdar, undermines the integrity of his government. We hope the government, Yunus and his associates, will take the public's opinion, the public's messages very seriously, informing and figuring out how they go forward. We want Hasina to be extradited, we want her to be in trial, and we want the others to be punished as well.
You obviously all want justice, and eventually there will be perhaps also the need to some sort of reconciliation between these multiple parts in the country. People might need to seek repentance, and then you guys might need to forgive them. I mean, Tasnima, how hopeful are you in the future? There's so much ahead of you guys now and so much work to be done. Very briefly, if you may, how hopeful are you for Bangladesh?
I think what we're seeing right now is unprecedented in Bangladesh's history. And as Prapti and John were mentioning, we are looking forward to a country that has to work on rebuilding the nation as well as implementing justice appropriately where it's needed. And so the address that Dr. had given us, was one that left hope in a lot of people, one that was focused on building national unity and a democratic and inclusive Bangladesh that's focused on combating corruption and rebuilding key sectors like the judiciary and banking and education system. And really, it's a vision that is about serving the public interest. So what's really important is, as Prapti had mentioned, is truly inviting people to be involved in rebuilding our own nation, implementing these claims into actual actionable items so that we can recover from the past 15 years and keep building upward. So as folks mentioned, it's going to take time, it's going to take patience, and it's going to take action.
And a lot of energy, but you guys certainly have that. Prapti, Tasnima, and John, thank you so much for speaking to us again here on the stream. And thank you all for watching. Keep in touch with us on social media. You can send us your questions and suggestions with the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into them. Take care, and I'll see you soon.